sci-fi books, so I'm sort of trying to.
I didn't like the second one much.
Pardon?
I never liked the second one.
Oh, these are much better. Instead of building mechanical machines, we'll be building biological machines with my laws of thermodynamics. Biomachinery will grow machines biologically. I will go with that. Now, what I'm talking about here is basically the cosmology of consciousness. I didn't know what to talk about this, and Boyce wanted me to talk to this group. He said, well, you always talk about your theories. Why don't you tell us about your theories? So basically, I'm going to do a mixture of cosmology and consciousness. Now, according to Wikipedia, this is from Wikipedia, so you go there. 90% of stuff in Wikipedia on science is safe to read. You have to be careful about the other 10% because it's lies. Cosmology is the study of the universe. In its totality and by extension, humanity's place in it. You get a good physics cosmology book, and the good one, last chapter 2, will be on life in the universe. So this is a legitimate talk. I'm not going to bounce this. There are 4 areas of cosmology: science, philosophy, esotericism, and religious. I'm covering the science of cosmology, which is usually called physical cosmology, and it's a branch of physics. Technically, it's called astrophysics, the physics of astronomy. It has become important in the last 100 years, extremely important, because of general relativity in the 19-teens and then 1929 when Hubble discovered the expanding universe. And in the last 30 years, cosmology and astrophysics have become one of the hottest areas in science. Up through the 50s and 60s, the quantum theory was the most accurate theory in the history of humankind. And they said quantum theory could make predictions accurate to the 12th decimal place. Well, astrophysics and cosmology surpassed them in about 1995 because we can now estimate out to the 12th, 13th, 14th decimal place of general relativity. So quantum theory is no longer the basis of science. The big things are the Big Bang. Cosmology predictions there's a Big Bang was the start of our universe. Cosmic inflation, which is rapid expansion. And that happened, as far as we can tell right now, about 13.7 billion years ago. Now, the important thing is the last sentence here, and I'll agree with Wikipedia on this. From its violent beginnings until its very speculative ends, cosmologists propose that the history of the universe has been governed entirely by physical laws. And that's not modern cosmology, that goes back to Newton. Since Newton, they've thought that the physical laws we discover here work all over the universe. And in all of our observations, they do. So physical laws that we derive are, as far as we can tell, universal. We can't test them until we get out there. That would be about 1 million to get out there to the far reaches of the universe, so it'll be a while. There are 3 periods of scientific cosmology. There's Aristotelian cosmology, developed about 350 BCE, adopted by the Roman Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. So religious philosophy and physical philosophy became the same thing from about 1300 on. And the best example is Dante's Inferno and the Purgatorio and Paradiso, his famous trilogy, where he actually states the Catholic cosmology. The Catholic Church took over Aristotelian cosmology. Then there's Newtonian cosmology when they finally split after 1687 when Newton published Principia with the 3 laws of motion and gravity. Then the 3rd period is modern cosmology, and that's a combination of Einstein's general theory of relativity in 1915 and 16 and thereafter, and Hubble's observation that the universe is expanding in 1929. Einstein's theory predicts the expansion, but it was observed independently, having nothing to do with general relativity by Hubble in his observations. Now, recent problems have developed in astrophysics and cosmology. Primarily, the existence of dark matter and it cannot be explained. Dark matter was originally predicted by, or observed by Fritz Zwicky in 1933, but it took science until 1970s to become interested in it because Gravitation theory wasn't considered for all those years. Everything was quantum theory and nuclear theory. So cosmology and astrophysics and observation of heavens were actually put on the back burner in science. That was confirmed by Vera Rubin and her group in the 1970s. What they noticed was the rotational speeds of stars around the center of galaxies and spiral galaxies is all wrong. Now that implied that there's a dark matter halo surrounding the galaxies. That's the only thing that can give the stars, the star systems going around the galactic core, enough speed. Now, according to both Newtonian and normal gravitational, Newtonian and Einsteinian gravitational theory, if you look at something like the solar system or the galaxy, you'll have a central body, in this case, the solar system. The sun. By the way, how many solar systems are there in the universe? Can anybody tell me? Pardon? One. Sol is the name of our star. So there's only one sol in the universe. There's only one solar system. The others are star systems. Please go tell that to the scientists. They don't even know it yet. But you have the star in the center, then you have the planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, all the way up. Now, the stars, because they heavily gravitated towards the sun, gravitationally attract sun, the inner planets go faster, and as you go out, they get slower, slower, slower. So that the orbit of Pluto, I'll be generous and call it a planet, even though it's no longer a planet, it's a planetoid. The orbit of Pluto is like 700 or 800 years because it's really slow. So going out from the central gravitational point of any system like this, the farther you go, the slower it gets.
Sweeping out equal area and equal time.
Yeah, Kepler sweeping out equal area in earlier time, in equal time. Now this is just another view showing the planets. This shows them in their that was their relative positions. This is their relative sizes. See, the really big planets are Jupiter, Saturn. They're much further apart. But see how small Earth is compared to either the Sun or the outer gas giants. These are gas giants. These are rocky planets of the Sun. And that's Pluto up there. And then you've got dwarf planets and things. There are actually planets bigger than, or planetoids bigger than Pluto that have been discovered out past Pluto. That's why Pluto is not on the planet. It's planetoid because there are bigger things further out. I don't want to call them planets, so they're all planetoids now. Now, this is a picture, a drawing, a rendering, because we can't take a picture of our galaxy. This is the Milky Way, what it will look like, because we're right here, so we're looking into the edge. It's like looking at the edge of my hand. I can't tell what the hand looks like. This picture is like this. So this is a rendering, a computer rendering of what our Milky Way galaxy should like. It is what is called a barred galaxy. In that, instead of having a central point with the spirals coming out, you have a bar in the middle, and then you have the various wings. Some people say we have two spirals, some say we three, but it's actually unique. There aren't that many galaxies like this. They usually have clear, very clear, 2 or 3 or even 4 spirals coming out. The large split, and then they have special names and everything. Now, compare this to the picture that I had of the solar system a little while ago. The planets get slower coming out. If I see this back in the spiral galaxies were confirmed back in the 1910s. Until 1926 or 27, astronomers and scientists thought the Milky Way galaxy was the whole universe. It was only in the middle 20s that we determined other galaxies were outside of our galaxy. So in the 20s, the universe itself expanded tremendously. How in the world, if it's going slower, slower, slower as you go out, how can this bar form and how can these arms form? They should be random as you go further out. And somebody looking at this in 1920 should say, there's something wrong with the speeds of those star systems because they line up in spirals. It's really funny that nobody knows that for 50 years. As far as I know, nobody noticed that until I thought it up about a year or two ago when I started studying this stuff. Really stupid. I mean, it's like looking at a dog and thinking it's a horse. They've been brainwashed not to see it. Please note spiral arms in the Milky Way galaxy. These are common to many galaxies, the majority of galaxies, but the speeds of stars and star systems spiral along around the galactic course do not follow any known law of gravity, or they wouldn't form those spiral arms. The just that simple. They don't follow Newtonian or Einsteinian gravity. There seems to be an additional gravitational source. The speeds of those star systems around the galactic core are constant all the way out. They all have the same speed. That's how they can line up these spirals. They don't get slower going out, according to Newton and Einstein. They have constant speeds. That means around that galaxy there's another gravitational source following a ring all the way around all around the galaxy. And that is called a halo. It's called a dark matter halo because the only thing we know that causes gravity is matter. It's dark because it doesn't seem to have any electromagnetic properties in that it doesn't bend light, or it bends light because of gravitation, but it doesn't give off light or reflect light. That's why it's dark. But we're making a guess calling it dark matter. And the material content of that halo is 9 to 10 times greater than the galaxy itself in order to give the star systems equal speeds in the rotational arm. Now that's only one problem. That's causing really big problems. Have no idea what that is. 1998 they discovered something called dark energy. This really upset the scientific community. Two teams of observers separately looking at type 1A supernova, SM supernova, noticed there's too much of a red shift. The light spectrum from the supernova was off a little bit, so they knew they didn't have the right speed. It's a Doppler shift, like when you hear a car coming to you, it goes, car coming to you, and then it goes by, it goes, lower speed. They should have lower speed or lower tone or red shift. That means they're moving away from us, just like a car moving away from us. It's a Doppler shift. These had too much red shift, more than they knew it should be. The farther away, the more the red shift, greater than normal. So that meant the expansion of the universe is speeding up when all theory and observation before had shown it to be slowing down. So the universe is expanding, but it's supposed to be slowing down. Now they have evidence it's speeding up. And what could be speeding up? Well, they say it's a negative pressure. Well, the only thing that could cause a negative pressure would be some type of dark energy that we don't know what it is or how it comes from. These are causing problems in physics. So much of a problem that right now they think 74% of the matter in the universe, matter and energy are interchangeable, so we put those together. 74% of the material content of the universe is 74 is dark energy, whatever that is. 22% of the universe is dark matter. And normal stars and normal matter only make up 4% of the universe. This is big. There's nothing in physics that can explain this. And they talk about hundreds of theories. You know, every week it's another 10 theories to explain this stuff. Nobody knows, and people are guessing. A group out in Oregon 2 years ago decided to invent a new particle instead of this being expanded because there's a new particle we've never discovered called acceleroids. My estimate is they have stupidon particles in their brains. They can't answer something, they invent a particle. That's bad physics, but they've been doing it for 50 years. Now, these are not simple mysteries that can be solved within the present paradigms of science. The present paradigms of physics are general relativity and the quantum theory. A new revolution in science has been called for by a number of scientists. So the past few years when I'm doing talks with you, it's not just me saying it, everyone's starting to say it. It's just I go further into what this revolution is going to be. So serious, the National Science Foundation, National Aeronautics, Department of Energy set up a panel called the Dark Energy Task Force in 2005 to investigate dark energy and see if it's real. And they've confirmed it in a number of different ways. It's no longer the observation of type 1A supernova. They've confirmed it other ways, its existence. And its problem. In 2006, the DEPF put out a report, a white paper report. More than 100 scientists from around the world sent in papers for this report. No one asked them to. They just did, voicing their opinions on dark energy. That's a big turnout in the scientific world. These are top scientists from all over the world sending in papers. This is not the introduction to the report. This is actually on the cover of the report. They didn't want to put it inside. They want anybody to read the Dark Energy Task Force report, and this is right below it. You can download it from the internet. Dark energy appears to be the dominant component of the physical universe, yet there is no persuasive theoretical explanation for its existence or magnitude. The acceleration of the universe is, along with dark matter, the observed phenomenon that most directly demonstrates that. This is my highlight here. Our theories of fundamental particles and gravity are either incorrect or incomplete. They're saying physics is crap. Modern theories, that's what they're saying. Most experts believe that nothing short of a revolution in our understanding of fundamental physics will be required to give a full understanding of cosmic acceleration. For these reasons, the nature of dark energy ranks among the very most compelling of all outstanding problems in physical science. These circumstances demand an ambitious observational program to determine dark energy properties as well as possible. NASA is putting up satellites to measure this. They're being planned as we speak. It's called JTEM, J-T-E-M. I don't know what the initials stand for. But they're putting up satellites in 2015 to test for dark energy and try and figure out what it's at. So we're putting billions of dollars. It's that important. This is probably the most important thing to hit science since somebody invented the wheel. I mean, it is that important. Now notice, the scientists are saying revolution, but then they turn around and say it's an outstanding problem in physical science. Hold it. That's a contradiction. According to the Kuhnian structure of scientific revolutions, you have crises start a revolution, not problems. Problems are solved by the old science, but here they're saying the old science can't solve these. So these are not problems, these are crises. So even they're recognizing a revolution, but not going far enough to really deal with it by saying that it's just a problem for physical science. It's not a problem, it's a crisis. We had two crises in the late 1800s. They led to the second scientific revolution. We have two crises now. We're replaying the scenario from the year 1900. Literally. Dark matter and dark energy are fundamental problems amounting to crises for scientific community. Scientific community is willing to admit that it will take a revolution to explain them, but also refuses to admit that the revolution will completely overturn the present paradigms of science, which are quantum theory and relativity. On the other hand, that's all they think that is going on. There's something else going on. I'm a historian besides a physicist, and I watch the trends, and those trends have been changing. This organization is part of those trends because the other trends deal with consciousness and mind. Scientific interest in human consciousness and consciousness studies have been growing geometrically since the 1970s. Interest in research in paranormal has also been growing and increasing at an exponential rate since the 1970s. The Parapsychology Association was accepted by the AAAS in 1969. It's sort of like a watershed thing. Studies of near-death experiences, reincarnation, etc., have been increasing since the 1970s. Normal psychologists have started talking about consciousness for the first time in more than a half century, in the 1970s. You see a trend here? Historical trend developing? Interest in spirituality and mysticism has also been keeping pace with these other advances. Since when? Since the late 60s or the 70s. Our whole concept of mind and consciousness has been changing from the 1970s. So, as far as I'm concerned, the pre-revolutionary period started in the year 1970, which means the revolution has already started. More recently, new discoveries regarding extraterrestrial life have been increasing. We're going to set up satellites within the next few years to look for extraterrestrial life. In case you didn't know, they're going to look at the atmospheres of planets that are transiting or going in front of their local stars. And they'll be able to tell what the atmosphere is. If the atmosphere has too much methane, that's a sign there's life on those planets. Because decaying life gives off methane. New discoveries of Earth-like planets is on the increase. Over 300 extrasolar planets have now been discovered. 2 years ago, they had 10 extrasolar planets outside our solar system. Now they know of over 300. When these new satellites go up, we'll be discovering them by the thousands. NASA will soon be launching a satellite whose sole purpose is to look for signs of life. The human genome and genomes of other species have now been mapped, and they've made lots of new discoveries about the human genome. Our whole biological science has changed radically just in the past 10 years. New discovery regarding what constitutes life, we're learning what those new discoveries involve. Vast amounts of new details on the human brain have come around in the last, from MRIs, the work done at DOPS down in Charlottesville, all over the place. They're finding out all kinds of things about the new brains. Knowledge about life, mind, and consciousness is exploding as much as cosmology is. Now, I contend that physicists are saying there's going to be a revolution. We're going to, for the first time in human history, we're going to have to look and see what the true nature of matter is. But we cannot know what the true nature of matter is unless we know what the nature of the mind and consciousness that are interpreting and making the theories is. So this is going to be a dual revolution. It will be the first dual revolution ever. There will be a revolution on one hand in mind and consciousness, and on the other hand in matter and physics. They have to know one to know the other. So this is going to be a revolution like none we have ever seen. This raises the question, what is the connection between life, mind, and consciousness on one side and dark matter and physics on the other? Simple as physics. Very simple, high school level physics. So let's call this a cosmology of life. Now, simplest physics. The whole universe is bid out and conforms to two basic equations. The first equation deals with Maxwell's electromagnetic theory. Electromagnetic forces hold atoms together, the electrons to the nuclei, and then atoms to atoms to make molecules. And then hold the molecules together to make tables and Coca-Cola and our human bodies. At the same time, gravity, Einstein-Newtonian gravity, hold the planets to stars, hold the stars together, hold the stars and stars and planetary systems together, and galaxies and all the galaxies together to make the whole universe. The whole universe can be explained in simple gravity theory and electromagnetic theory, as long as we have the right theories. That boils down to, I'm sorry to give you an equation. You're in trouble. This represents those two forces. On the top, we have electromagnetic force, and down here, gravitational force. You put a charged particle in an electric field, and it causes a force. You move that charged particle at speed v and put it in an external magnetic field. The moving particle generates a magnetic field around it. This magnetic field interacts with that to get the magnetic force. You put a mass in a gravitational field and you get weight. That's all they need. Now, the big thing that students usually ask me at this point, what is a field? A field is physical, but non-material. I'm going to give you an example of a field. I'm going to give you magnets. Magnetic field is really easy to feel. As these come around, put North Pole to North Pole and try to push them together. It's like there's something between them. The closer you push them together, the harder it is. Like you've got a big sponge in there. These are strong magnets. Watch your fingers. In case you can't hear them. These are strong. What's pulling them together? There's nothing material pulling them together. Matter is matter. It has mass. Field is not material, but it's still physical. Everything is material is not physical. Or I'm sorry, everything material is physical. Not everything physical is material. Because electric, magnetic, and gravitational fields are physical, but not material. Yes, I know. Don't play with them forever. You play with them afterwards if you want. And like I said, please watch your fingers. These are strong magnets.
Treated like such children.
Yes. But you can feel the field in between them. And it's not matter. It's not material. But it's just magnetic is the strongest. Electric, if I can rub a balloon on my shirt and put it up there, it would be that QE up there.
Is it an energy?
No, it's not an energy. The field is not a force field. There is no force in the field. There's no force until a particle interacts with the field. Then the product is a force. So they're not force fields. What they are is they're fields of potential. When I put the particle in, it creates a force. Another way of saying that is the potential of the field interacting with the particle creates a potential energy. So there's no energy until the particle is there. It's just potential. So we have gravitational potential, electric potential, and magnetic potential. We have three types of potential.
You know, it sounds pretty mysterious. What's the difference between this mysterious physical stuff or whatever and what you're calling dark matter?
That's what I'm going to explain in a moment. I'll tell you exactly. I'm going to give you the secret. Nobel Prize guaranteed. They've already stated Nobel Prize guaranteed for dark matter or for dark matter. Dark energy. I'm going to vote. I'm not. There's no such thing as force fields. Fields are fields of potential. Potential is what makes a field a field. And when a particle interacts with that potential, it gains potential energy. We're all familiar with potential because electrical potential is called volts. You all know what volts are? That's the measurement of electrical potential. Now, we also have magnetic potential. It's in the laws, Maxwell's laws, but we can't measure it. There is no such thing as magnetic volts, but we know it's there because it's been verified it's there by experiment. But we can't measure it. This is one of those four big holes in magnetic theory I was talking about. Magnetic potential has never been measured. It is physically impossible to measure. So there is no such thing as magnetic hole, only electrical. Gravitational potential, try to measure that. I put an object there, I put it there, I calculate the difference.
But it's just as mysterious as everything's working.
No, gravitational potential is not.
That kind of mysterious.
No, it is not mysterious. We've known since Newton what gravitational potential is.
I thought it was warped.
No. You're not wrong. We know what gravitational potential is.
Did you say that magnetic potential has been detected, but it's
been verified experimentally because experiments show that there's an effect coming, and that effect can only be from magnetic potential. But we cannot measure. We cannot take any kind of meter and measure it. There's a reason. I'm going to show you the reason. Electric and gravitation are called scalar potential. That means they have magnitude or size only, and we can measure them. Magnetic potential is a vector potential. Vector has length. Yet vector potential occurs at points in space. But according to mathematics, they have length. Where the heck is the length? If they have length, the length is in the fourth dimension of space. That's why we can't measure it. I did not say that. Clifford said it 140 years ago. There's your verification there's fourth dimension of space.
Where would you put a Josephson junction?
Pardon?
Josephson junctions.
I'm not going to get into that kind of stuff. I'm not. Let me finish and ask questions later because I'm having trouble finishing this as it is. That guarantees that cross product. You take a 3 cross product with 3 space. It automatically, according to the laws of vector mathematics, gives you a 4th dimension. That has been ignored by science since Maxwell himself, because Clifford told them that, and Maxwell and Kelvin said no, because they could not imagine a 4th dimension of space. So said it's not true. And so, even though the mathematics says it's there, it's been denied by science for 130 years. I said there are 4 big holes in magnetic theory. That's 2 of them right here. Now, here's a scalar field. The blue is field. You've got the mass in the gravity field causing force. You've got the blue scalar field with the charge. The charge is moving, causing a magnetic field around it. They interact to give you magnetic. So the blue represents 3 types of fields. Now, don't these 2 equations look a bit lopsided? That's because they are. If they're somehow similar, gravity and electromagnetism, you expect the equations to look together. So gravity should be this. Now gravity is this is Newtonian. You put that into space-time curvature, and that's Einsteinian. There's something else there that nobody knows about. what is missing in the gravitational equation. That expression. Now what that means is there is a gravitational vector potential that has never been detected or theorized by science. But it is there. Now, let's think about what are material bodies. Material bodies are not solid, are they? Who thinks this table is solid? This table, my body, that table, this microphone, my glasses, when we think of material bodies are 99.99% empty space. The only true matter in them is in the nuclei, protons, neutrons, and electrons. And they take up only 0.01% of the volume of these objects. The rest is empty space. Well, if I'm all empty, nearly all empty space, and the table's all nearly all empty space, why can't I not put my hand through the table? Why can't I not just walk through that wall? Because that space is not filled up with matter. It is filled up with electric field and magnetic field. So when I try to put my hand through this table, the electric field of my hand is repulsed by the electric field of the table. Right now, I am not touching this table. If I were actually touching this table, my hand would weld to the table. They would become a single object. I can only get it infinitesimally close without actually touching it, because the two electric fields are repelling each other. Then those are changing electric fields, and according to Maxwell's law, a changing magnetic field generates a magnetic field. So, our bodies are not solid. They're not material. They're only partly material. All material bodies made of combinations of three fields: gravity, electric, magnetic. In modern physics, gravity would be called a metric field. That's general relativity. Then electric is electric and magnetic is magnetic. But in a living body, there are special self-sustaining energy interchanges between atoms. They're called chemical processes or biochemical processes. The biochemical processes in living bodies are stable energy exchange processes. In other words, they are patterns. These form a stable energetic pattern that defines life. If you take the gravitational field, all variations, the protons, neutrons, atoms, and variations, and map them out in general relativity, it looks like a three-dimensional blanket of little tiny lumps and valleys with material particles. That pattern is stable over time. It is self-sustaining. That pattern is the true nature of life. That is undeniable. That is high school physics, and you're taught that. Except for saying it's the true nature of life, that is taught in high school physics all around the world. That is what they call the biofield. The biofield is a metric field. Okay. Now, the biofield is the matter energy field. But you've also got an electric field because the electron exchanges between atoms and molecules during the biochemical processes. That forms a very, very specific, very complicated, complex, self-sustaining, stable electrical field. Then those changes in the electrical field create a self-sustaining, stable magnetic field. This is very complicated because it's in every atom in your body. If you could spread it out on a tabletop, the tabletop would be as large as North America with variations of little tiny rocks. Because I'm talking about voltage variations at the billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a normal volt, like in a 12-volt battery. That's how small these are. So you have small variations, but the overall pattern is humongous. Now, this electric field pattern, because it's stable, constitutes mind, and the corresponding magnetic field pattern is consciousness. Now, what that means, everybody knows about these patterns. That's, again, simple high school physics. I'm the only one that's saying the patterns are life, mind, and consciousness. And I have specific reasons to do that I won't have time to do. There are specific scientific reasons for doing that. So what's the difference between living material bodies, matter, and non-living bodies, matter, and animate? They all have the same, a star is made up of the same three fields. A black hole is, neutron stars. Pluto is. The difference is that the self-sustained stable patterns in rocks and stars and stuff, they're not as complex. They're much farther more complex in living bodies. And the more evolved a living body, the more complex it is. So all living bodies have all three. Now what I'm saying is that all living bodies, that the simplest organism has mind and consciousness. But these are pre-emergent mind and consciousness. Through evolution, mind finally emerges, and then later in evolution, human level, lower level consciousness, and then human level consciousness emerge as the organism grows more and more complex. So this also explains all of evolution theory. I'm sorry if you reduced evolution, but I just reduced it to physics. Again, I have more technical papers I've written up and published on this. So if you want more details, you'll have to go to those. Now, it doesn't matter whether you throw a 50-kilogram rock or a 50-kilogram person off a cliff. As far as normal physics, quantum theory, and general relativity, Newtonian theory, it doesn't matter which you throw off the cliff. They both fall at the same rate. According to gravity theory. The difference is one screams and the other one doesn't. Or one makes a choice to go off the cliff and the other one doesn't. So the real difference is in the complex patterns that constitute life, mind, and consciousness in the living organism. Now then, this evolves. The mind controls, once you have life evolving from whatever muck it did, it gets more and more complex until it starts developing internal organs with specialized functions. When it gets complex enough, it also has to evolve, the material energy pattern has to evolve brain to control the rest of the organs and the chemical processes. But at the time when it develops brain in the matter-energy field pattern, it also, the mind pattern, electrical pattern, also evolves into complexity that we call mind. So the brain and mind evolve together at the same time. But the mind does not operate through the brain. Or it's not coexistent with the brain. It is the whole body. Not the brain. It just operates through the brain because that's where the majority of the neurons are, through which it operates. But the changing electric fields generate magnetic field patterns, just as the mind generates consciousness by storing memories. So the magnetic field pattern is consciousness. This is the simple reason why I'm saying the magnetic field pattern is consciousness. The magnetic field pattern controls the electric changes just as it. When mind evolves, because it's a complexity, it then turns around and controls the matter-energy, like biofield. So mind controls biofield. Then consciousness eventually evolves, and then it becomes an organizing field, and it organizes mind, which organizes body. So those are big jumps in evolution. Evolution theory cannot explain these gigantic leaps because they're looking at slow evolution theory from molecules upward, from biochemical processes upward. But when you evolve mind and various levels of consciousness, they organize everything below, and you have a big leap in evolution. Now that big leap is the one thing that evolution has not been able to explain. It's not bottom up, it's top down. Evolution can't explain that, and that's why people talk about what type of evolution?
Intelligent design.
Intelligent design, correct.
There's something to that.
We're the designers. These complexities are the designers. This, several hundred million years ago, they had something called the Cambrian explosion. Life was just masses and gobs of living material. And all of a sudden, bam, you get two-sided, complex life forms. That was the first step. That was going from simple organisms to mind. That was that complexity. Then the one that gave us human consciousness that they can't explain 120,000 years ago, that's the emergence of human consciousness and then recontrolling. After it recontrols, it reconfigures the human genome, or the genome, so that from then on that pattern is inherited. But it's inherited like a blank book. Everybody then fills in the book with their own memories, and we get higher and higher consciousness as we go. They said this is the physics of evolution. Now, we go back to the equations. These are three-dimensional, QE and MG. Those are three-dimensional. This, as I said, is four-dimensional. then you've got general relativity, the metric field, but then it goes to five-dimensional space-time with Kaluza field, or Kaluza's. These two equations combined by Kaluza in 1921. What about that something else I was talking about? We still need to account for dark matter and energy to understand nature matter. That something else that I was talking about accomplishes exactly this. Because this gravitational vector potential that I introduced with this four-dimensional combustion gravity makes the space-time curvature extrinsic, outside the normal normal general relativity. The curvature is inside four-dimensional space-time. I say it's curved into the higher dimensions, so it makes it an extrinsic space curvature. And the gravitational potential is dark energy. The extrinsic space-time curvature is dark matter. I've just defined. That's my Nobel Prize. I've just defined dark matter and dark energy. And I can explain this using simple geometry and Pythagorean theorem, which I do in front of American Physical Society audiences. I'm up with 15 or 20 people listening to me at one session. Now, I can put this more in the diagrammatic form. This, between these dotted lines, that's our three-dimensional. It's a sheet. Our three-dimensional space is like a slice out of the overall four-dimensional space. Then time is added on. This is like a slice or a sheet in fourth dimension. So this is the thickness of the sheet, our three-dimensional sheet. So this stretch is the fifth dimension. Now matter only exists in this part of the sheet. The brain is material, the living organism or body is material. So this is material. Our five senses act here into the body, through the body, to the brain, into the life pattern, but memories go around life pattern into mind, store in mind. When those memories become complex enough, human consciousness emerges. So I'm basing my theory of consciousness on, human consciousness, on the complexity of memories. And with this theory I'm able to explain recall recognition and how memory is stored, and how so much memory is stored in these little things that are way too small to store all of our memories. Now, sensory input comes here, from three-dimensional space. It's our five senses. But we have also got this higher dimension up here. You can also gain information across this five-dimensional space. If it's mind-to-mind or consciousness, that is your sixth sense. Telepathy, clairvoyance, and such. That's just the thing of pattern matching. Memory patterns matching memory patterns. That's transmitted across this. This five-dimensional space-time is filled with a single field. A single field is a precursor to electric field, gravity field, and the single field is Einstein's idea. We call it the unified field. If consciousness interacts with the material world up here without going through the body, you've got telekinesis, remote viewing, and all those things. Now, so what we've done is I take a five-dimensional Kaluza field, which combines this, and this. I've added my little thing here. That becomes a single field. Everything in a single field is connected because a single field is just one big single field. Everything we know is structures within that single field. That gives everything in the universe a special connectivity, which in quantum physics they call entanglement. And in parapsychology we call psi. So this is the mechanism of psi, for all psi phenomena. At the same time, I can put this is called the Boyle wave equation right here. I just put that in for my MV, and I have something called quantum gravity, which the quantum physicists have been looking for 4 years for and unable to find. So here's quantum gravity. So right now I've got about 10,000 physicists sitting on my tail wishing they were doing this. But they won't listen to me, so it doesn't matter. Now, when we die here, what happens when we die? The body dies, and the biofield dies. The chemical processes die. The matter and energy fields deteriorate. But that doesn't mean mind and consciousness are affected at all. The mind and consciousness are electromagnetic. They're not material. This is material. This is electromagnetic. Upon death, biochemical interactions of the body cease, and the biofield light pattern breaks down and dissipates. The material particles that constitute the body then dissipate, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The That's a material body. We have the scalar potential, which is a mind pattern, and we have vector potential here, which is a consciousness pattern. All the things crossed out die on normal death. But these two are intimately connected together. They hold each other. They're very complex patterns. They hold each other together. So they survive death. Your electromagnetic body survives death of the material body. We are not material beings. We are electromagnetic beings with little tiny dots of protons, neutrons, and electrons in us. And that electromagnetic body can survive death. Whether it's self-aware or not after death, who knows? That depends on how enlightened you are during life. If you reach a high enough level of consciousness, if you know this stuff is true, then you become aware when you die. Give me a moment. So here we have the afterlife. The afterlife is this electromagnetic body still survives. Now, believe it or not, this survival is guaranteed according to Maxwell's third and fourth laws. There are 4 laws in Maxwell's electromagnetic theory. The first 2 deal with particles. One particle gives electric field, a moving particle gives a magnetic field. The other 2 laws, the third and fourth, says a changing electric field, E, generates magnetic field B, and vice versa. Changing magnetic field generates an electric field without the intervention of material charged particles. So once particles are gone, that still remains. And what is that? That is where the light wave comes from. If I take an electron and charged particle, any kind of charged particle, wiggle at some frequency, it is going to emit an electromagnetic wave at that same frequency, because it's a changing electromagnetic field according to the third and fourth laws here. So if I wiggle an electron like this, or even if I put an electrostatic charge on this and wiggle it like that, I'm emitting an electromagnetic wave at that same frequency. But if I stop wiggling this, the electromagnetic wave doesn't die. It continues on spreading out through space because it's independent of this. By the same token, our electromagnetic bodies are independent because of the third and fourth law of the material bodies. When the material body stays, they remain because they are complexities and stable and self-sustaining on their own. Again, whether you're aware of self or anything else after you die, whether the electromagnetic body is. In other words, mind and consciousness survive. Whether they are aware depends on how enlightened, how smart you are, whether you've had a near-death experience and touched that higher dimension, or had some other mystical enlightenment experience that touched that higher, experienced that higher dimension, then you're aware when you die. Your mind and consciousness are aware when you die. So, in this model, in this physical model, Maxwell's laws, the same one that gives us the lights, the electricity, the computers, and everything else, the electrical systems in our cars and everything else, lightning, the magnetic fields of the earth also give us the survival, or guarantee the survival of mind and consciousness. There's also a precursor to this electromagnetic body, and it's light itself. Why do you think they report a white light? They are, in a sense, a very complex electromagnetic pattern. And that's what the higher dimension is filled with. Light, electromagnetic patterns. So when you die, that's why you see the white light. White light is just your first sensation of your connection in the single field with the rest of the universe. So that's what remains after death. Before death, the mind, scalar potential, and conscious vector potential patterns are reinforced by each other. The complexity of one fed the complexity of the other. They were mutually coherent in the language of physics. So when the life pattern dissipates upon death, the mind and consciousness patterns remain intact by continuing to reinforce each other so they do not dissipate into nothing upon death. And this is what remains. This is according to physics. This is not a soul. This is not a spirit. I refuse to define either of those terms. They are not physics scientific terms. I'm only saying the mind and consciousness side. Whatever soul and spirit are, they are at least the mind consciousness pattern. Beyond that, use your own religious beliefs. These two reinforce each other. According to Maxwell's third and fourth laws, then they are adrift in a higher spatial dimension in some state of self-awareness depending on the previous level of consciousness or enlightenment of the living organism that generated it. The afterlife. Your physical body is a fine, complex electromagnetic potential field pattern in the higher fourth dimension, single field that fills space. I've already said that. Now this explains everything. I can easily, with this model, reincarnations, 2 minutes. Near-death experiences are 4 or 5 minutes. Apparitions and hauntings only take about 15 seconds. Basically, well, it's an electromagnetic pattern, same as life. Only life is a very simple one. This is an extremely complex electromagnetic pattern. If for some reason, either by choice or non-recognition that you're dead, that pattern interacts with the material sheet again, how does it interact? It gives off light waves that have no solidity to them. And what do we call that?
Ghost.
A ghost. An apparition. Damn, that was easy. As I said, this is not especially a soul, but whatever soul is, it would at least contain this mind and consciousness complexity pattern. Again, what a soul is, or even a spirit, I leave that to everyone's religious beliefs and philosophical beliefs. I'm doing science here. And keep on asking about it, I don't even want to do it. I refuse to use it. I just say it's beyond science, whatever it is. Now this also means that every living organism and being has life, mind, and consciousness corresponding to the whole body. However, mind and consciousness are only emergent patterns in lower forms of life. So an amoeba has mind and consciousness, but they're pre-emergent. In other words, they're too chaotic to be compared to us. Then as you go through evolution, they become more and more complex until they develop our mind and consciousness through evolutionary process. Mind emerges as a complexity corresponding to the emergence of brain and three-dimensional material body. Consciousness emerges from memory patterns when the organism distinguishes between self, which in physics is locality, and the environment, which is non-locality, three-dimensional space and time. This model predicts higher consciousness as a realization or experience of the higher dimension of space, as is near-death experiences and enlightenment. I made it.
Yes,
What is mind? What is mind? Never matter. What is matter?
No mind.
Never mind. What is the soul? It's immaterial.
Here, I'll take it around.
Don't drop it. I can drop it.
Jim, how would you explain or defend this position? Somebody once, I was explaining about some of these unusual experiences that people have when they're grieving, and he said, look, energy never dies. He said,
Misuse of term.
Pardon me?
Misuse of term. Potential never dies.
Well,
Electromagnetic potential never dies.
This,
The electromagnetic potential only interacts with matter to give you energy. So this is pre-energy. The pre-energy physical form is what survives, not energy.
well, he went on to say that because energy doesn't go away, that what we're seeing when we see an apparition is, I forgot how he put it, the residual energy or energy that's been left by the person.
That actually comes from The Unseen Universe, written by Tate and Guthrie in the 82, well-known physicists written in the late 1870s.
So that's a bunch of baloney.
No, it's not a bunch of baloney. It's thermodynamics. That's the thermodynamical principles. I said it's written in a book by 2 scientists.
So you can't
Titled The
refute
Unseen
what this
Universe.
guy said.
Well, that's what he said, but he's like 3/4 there. I'm the other quarter there. It's not the energy that survives, it's a potential. Potential is like pre-energy. Potential interacting with matter gives you the energy. So the potential that survives, electromagnetic potential pattern that survives, interacts with matter, then you've got potential energy that can be a ghost or an apparition or a reincarnation event or such.
Then the only other thing I wanted to ask to be sure, if like Craig said, that the mind is outside the brain, then our memories are not in our brain, they're on the outside.
This is the fourth dimension stuff I was telling you about. They're inside you, but not inside you. I'm not trying to be mystical. They're inside you, but they're in the fourth dimensional extension of your three-dimensional body. So they're not in your three-dimensional body. They're in the fourth dimensional extension of your three-dimensional body, which gives you, as far as concerned, infinite storage place for memory, because that fourth dimensional component has a length of 13.22 billion light years. So your body is extended into the higher dimension, fourth dimension, 13.22 billion light years long. I got a big body. But all that big body, that's your electromagnetic potential pattern. It needs more explanation than that. I just said that.
Jim, would you go back over to the Cambrian explosion one more time?
The Cambrian explosion.
What made that happen?
What was that, 300 million years ago?
No, that's 700 billion years.
Okay. Basically what happened is you've got a chaotic chemical pattern that's called a big blob of living material. It's slowly getting more and more complex. I mean, it interacts with physically with heat, and so it goes a new skin over there. And by physical interactions with the environments, it's becoming more and more complex. Also, at that level, it might even absorb another chemical reaction or another living being and put it into itself. So it becomes more and more complex. Eventually, it reaches a level where it has a chaotic complexity, a new stability level. If you know anything about, who knows about chaos theory? Okay, the random variations of water molecules and air molecules are totally random, chaotic. Except when they form a hurricane, and a hurricane is a complexity of the same random water and air molecules. The air is like that, like a simple globular life form. But eventually it gets chaotic enough that it starts forming matches and coherence, and it forms a complexity like the hurricane. When it forms that first complexity, that would be mind. Then when it forms that complexity, the complexity becomes an organizational principle and reorganizes it. That reorganization from top down. That's a Cambrian explosion.
Okay, that's good.
And it develops the duality and everything.
I see. But it does sound like the Cambrian explosion itself was led up to by the bottom up. At some point,
yes.
From bottom up to top
In the history of science, we argue, how does science progress? By evolution or revolution? Both.
Okay.
Evolution is slow process. Even in evolution of thought, it's slow process until you get a new idea that rearranges everything. That's the top down. It's a combination of bottom up, normal evolution, and the top down, which is a big leap.
Yes.
That's what they don't accept. Although some scientists talk about it. That explains all those magical leaps in evolution we can't explain. Yes.
Jim, about 20 minutes ago, I received an email from an attorney friend of mine who has no idea where I am or what I'm doing. He sent me a video explaining electromagnetic and geomagnetic fields.
Yep.
All about synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, or cosmic consciousness.
Well, one of the major questions, I've already just gotten to some of the questions about soul and God, so hopefully you will answer them. But what about cosmic consciousness? Since we're all just different patterns within the same single field, the universe is conscious as long as there's one consciousness in, because my consciousness in this extent is extended over the whole. So I don't realize it, or I'm starting to realize it, hopefully, that my consciousness covers the whole universe because it's part of that single field, just as all of ours do. All we have to do is realize it. And that's what the enlightenment is. I'm doing the physics of the field. Near-death experiencers, mystically enlightened people, they experience it. You take the experience of the field, and you take my physics of the field, you got the whole shebang. And you understand what it is. And that's what I call the misfit. Mystical fit. Physicist. Misfit. Mystical physicist. Combining those two. But that's your cosmic consciousness. I could explain lots of things from
There's a Freudian slip there because you could also say misfit, talking about yourself.
That's on purpose. It's not.
Leave it to God.
You got it! You got it, Don. You got it. I missed it. We're all missed it. That's why we're here. It says I'm MYSPHYD. Some of you might be MISFIDs. I don't know. You have to determine that yourself.
Jim, thank you so very much for this.